The stars looked different today. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Dakota, watching the endless black space through the main screen. His ship moved slowly through the Kepler 442 system, doing their usual patrol work. Everything seemed normal. The crew was relaxed, talking quietly at their stations. Jake had been a starship captain for 12 years. He had seen many strange things in space. He had met 17 different alien races. Some were friendly, some were not. But he always followed the same rules when meeting new aliens. Stay calm, be respectful, never show fear. Captain, where? Getting something weird on the sensors, said Lieutenant Commander Lisa Park. She was the ship's science officer. Lisa was smart and careful. She never got excited about small things. If she said something was weird, Jake listened. What kind of weird? Jake asked, walking over to her station. Lisa looked at her screens with a worried face. There's some kind of energy reading coming from the fourth planet. It's not like anything I've seen before. The energy levels are huge, but they're not giving off heat or radiation. Commander Ben Tucker looked up from his weapons station. Could it be a trap? Maybe pirates using new technology? Jake shook his head. Pirates don't have technology this advanced. Keep scanning, Lisa. Let me know if anything changes. Dr. Amy. Foster walked onto the bridge. She was the ship's expert on alien life. Amy had helped with first contact meetings many times. She always stayed calm and followed the rules. Captain, I'm reading some unusual brain activity from the crew. People are reporting strange dreams and headaches. Before Jake could answer, the lights on the bridge went dim. A low humming sound filled the air. Every person on the bridge grabbed their heads as a sharp pain hit them. Jake felt like someone was pushing needles into his brain. Then the voice came. It wasn't heard through their ears. The voice came from inside their minds. It was deep and powerful, like thunder rolling across mountains. The voice spoke in perfect English, even though no human had ever been to this system before. Mortals of the void, you have entered the domain of the Zephyrians. We are your gods. Submit, serve, and be blessed with our divine presence. The pain in Jake's head got worse. He saw images that were not his own thoughts. He saw massive beings, floating in pure light. They had many arms and legs that moved like liquid metal. Their faces were beautiful and terrible at the same time. They looked down at tiny creatures, humans, aliens, entire worlds, like a person might look at ants. We have guided the growth of life across this galaxy for millions of years. The voice continued. We have watched species rise and fall. We have chosen which civilizations deserve to survive. You are nothing without our blessing. The bridge crew was on their knees, holding their heads. Even Ben Tucker, who was the strongest man Jake knew, was shaking from the pain. Only Jake remained standing, though his legs felt weak. We know your thoughts, small captain, the voice said, and Jake knew it was speaking directly to him. You think you are brave. You think your species is special. You are wrong. You are insects that have learned to fly between the stars. Nothing more. Jake forced himself to speak, even though his throat felt dry. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Federation ship Dakota. We come in peace. We follow the Galactic contact protocols. If you wish to establish communication, we can arrange a proper meeting. The beings in his mind laughed. The sound was like breaking glass mixed with screaming wind. Protocols? You dare speak of protocols to gods? Your arrogance amuses us? Suddenly, the Dakota's engines stopped working. The ship began to drift in space. All the lights went out, except for emergency power. The artificial gravity became weak, making everyone feel light and dizzy. We have done this with a thought, the voice said. From our world, millions of miles away, we have crippled your vessel. This is the smallest taste of our power. Imagine what we could do if we were truly angry. Jake looked at his crew. They were scared, but they were still at their stations. Lisa was working on her computers, trying to understand what had happened. Ben was checking the weapon systems. Amy was taking notes about everything she saw and heard. They were good people. They didn't deserve to be treated like this. "What do you want from us?" Jake asked. "What all gods want from their subjects," the voice replied. "Worship, obedience, recognition of our supreme power. You will send representatives to our world. They will kneel before us and acknowledge that we are your masters. They will speak for all of humanity and pledge your species to our service." Images filled Jake's mind again. He saw massive temples built by alien hands. He saw creatures from a dozen different worlds bowing down before the floating Zephyrians. He saw planets covered in shrines and statues. All of it was dedicated to these beings who called themselves gods. "We have done this with thousands of species," the voice continued. "Some came willingly, others required persuasion. A few required examples to be made. We prefer willing servants, but we are not opposed to making our point clear. And if we—" "Refuse?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer would be bad. "Then you will join the species that no longer exists," the voice said simply. "We are patient, but not infinitely so. We give you 7 of your days to send your representatives. If you do not come, we will visit your worlds instead. We will show your people what happens to those who defy gods." The pain in everyone's head suddenly stopped. The Dakota's engines came back online. The lights returned to normal. Everything was working again, as if nothing had happened, but something had changed. Jake could see it in his crew's faces. They had all felt the power of the Zephyrians. They had all seen the images of alien civilizations kneeling in worship. They had all heard the promise of destruction if humanity refused to submit. "Lisa, get me a channel to Earth Command," Jake said quietly. "Priority 1. Tell them we have a first contact situation, but not the kind we've dealt with before." "What are we going to tell them, Captain?" Amy asked. Her voice was shaky. Jake looked out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, beings with godlike power were waiting for humanity's answer. They had 7 days to decide the future of their entire species. "We're going to tell them the truth," Jake said. "We've met something that claims to be divine, and now we have to figure out if we're going to bow down or fight back." The Dakota continued its patrol, but nothing felt the same anymore. The stars looked different because now Jake knew that somewhere among them, gods were watching and waiting. The news spread across human space like wildfire. Within hours of Captain Morrison's report, every colony, every space station, every ship knew about the beings who called themselves gods. The reaction was exactly what Jake had feared it would. On New Denver Colony, people gathered in the streets, some praying, others shouting that the end times had come. The governor had to call in security forces to stop the riots. 3 other colonies started building shrines, just in case the Zephyrians were watching. The stock markets crashed as people sold everything they owned, thinking money would not matter if gods ruled the galaxy. But in the command center on Earth, Admiral Kate Sullivan was not panicking. She had been in charge of the Federation fleet for 8 years. She had fought pirates, dealt with hostile aliens, and survived 3 different wars. She did not believe in gods, especially ones that showed up demanding worship. "Show me the recording again," she told her aide. The holographic display showed Captain Morrison on the bridge of the Dakota, his face pale as he described the mental contact. The recording captured the moment when the ship's engines failed and came back online. It was impressive, but Kate had seen impressive technology before. "Get me Dr. Ryan Hayes," she ordered. Dr. Hayes was the Federation's best scientist when it came to understanding weird alien technology. He was a thin man with messy hair who always looked like he had just woken up. But his brain was one of the sharpest in human space. "Admiral, I've been studying the sensor data from the Dakota," Dr. Hayes said as he walked into the command center. "The energy signatures are unlike anything we've seen, but they're not impossible. I think we're looking at matter-energy manipulation on a massive scale." English, Doctor, Kate said. Ryan smiled. They're not gods. They're aliens with very advanced technology. The question is, how advanced? And more importantly, do they have weaknesses? Kate nodded. That's what I wanted to hear. I'm putting together a diplomatic mission. We're going to visit these Zephyrians and find out what they really are. Admiral, with respect, that could be suicide, said Captain Troy Miller, who had just joined the meeting. Troy was Kate's best diplomatic officer. He had successfully made peace with 6 different alien races. If they really do have godlike power, we could be flying into a trap. That's exactly why we're going, Kate replied. Captain Morrison was right to refuse their demands. Humanity doesn't bow to anyone, especially beings who threaten us. But we need to know what we're dealing with before we make any final decisions. 2 days later, the USS Virginia left Earth orbit with Captain Miller in command. The Virginia was designed for diplomatic missions, with comfortable meeting rooms and advanced communication equipment. But it also carried the best sensors and recording devices the Federation could build. The Dakota joined them as an escort ship. Jake Morrison was glad to have something to do besides wait for the 7 days to end. His crew was nervous but ready. They had been the first to meet the Zephyrians, and they wanted to be there when humanity gave its answer. Dr. Hayes had spent the 2 days building special equipment. If the Zephyrians are using technology to appear godlike, these sensors should be able to detect it, he explained to the assembled crew. Look for energy patterns that don't match what we're seeing. Look for hidden machinery. Look for anything that proves they're not what they claim to be. The journey to the Zephyrian homeworld took 3 days. As they got closer, the sensors began picking up incredible readings. The planet was surrounded by structures that seemed to be made of pure energy. Ships moved between them, but they didn't look like any ships the humans had ever seen. They looked more like living creatures, made of light and metal. Captain, we're receiving a transmission, reported the communications officer on the Virginia. The same voice that had spoken to the Dakota crew filled both ships. Welcome, mortals. You have come to witness true divinity. Prepare yourselves for transport to our sacred realm. Before anyone could respond, both ships were surrounded by a golden light. Jake felt the same strange sensation he had experienced during the first contact. It was like being pulled apart and put back together at the same time. When the light faded, both ship crews found themselves standing in a massive crystal city floating high above the planet's surface. The city was beautiful beyond description. Towers of pure light stretched up into the sky. Gardens filled with plants that seemed to be made of living gems grew everywhere. And floating above it all were the Zephyrians themselves. They were even more impressive in person than they had been in the mental images. Each one was at least 12 feet tall, with multiple arms that moved like flowing water. Their faces were perfect, with features that seemed to combine the best qualities of every race they had ever encountered. They glowed with internal light that made them look like angels. Behold, said the larger Zephyrian, who introduced himself as High Deity. Corthel, you stand in the heart of divine creation. What you see here was built by thought alone. What you breathe was created from the void. What you experience is beyond the understanding of mortal minds. To prove his point, Corthel raised one of his many hands. The crystal beneath their feet became liquid, then formed into a perfect statue of Captain Miller. Another gesture, and the statue came to life, moving and speaking exactly like the real captain. Impressive, Dr. Hayes whispered, but his sensors were working overtime, recording. Everything. Another Zephyrian demonstrated control over time itself, showing them images of events that would happen tomorrow. A third Zephyrian created a small star in his palm, then made it explode in a shower of harmless light. We have done this for thousands of species, Corthel explained. We guide their development. We protect them from the dangers of the galaxy. We give their lives meaning by allowing them to serve a higher purpose. Amy Foster, who had come with the diplomatic mission, was studying the Zephyrians carefully. Something about their demonstrations bothered her, but she couldn't figure out what it was. Your species shows promise, Corthul continued. You have spread across many worlds. You have developed impressive technology for such young beings. With our guidance, you could become one of the great servant races of the galaxy. And if we refuse? Captain Miller asked. Why would you refuse paradise? Corthul replied. Look around you. See what we offer. Your people would want for nothing. They would have purpose. They would be part of something greater than themselves. Dr. Hayes was frowning at his sensor readings. The Zephyrian city was incredible, but his instruments were picking up something else. Hidden beneath the beauty, there were machines. Lots of them. And they were all connected to the Zephyrians themselves. Amy Foster noticed something else. The Zephyrians' predictions about the future were always about things they could control. They predicted which direction the wind would blow, but they had devices that controlled the weather. They predicted what their servants would do, but those servants wore collars that might be controlling their minds. We need time to consider. Your offer, Captain Miller said diplomatically. Time? Corthul seemed amused. Very well. You have seen our power. You have witnessed our glory. Surely your answer is obvious. As the diplomatic ceremony continued, Jake Morrison caught Amy's eye. She nodded slightly toward a section of the Crystal City where the energy barriers seemed thinner. If Dr. Hayes was right about hidden technology, that might be where they could find proof. The Zephyrians expected humanity to be overwhelmed by their display of power. They expected the humans to fall to their knees and beg for the privilege of serving gods. They had seen it happen with every other species they had encountered, but humans were different. Humans had a habit of asking uncomfortable questions, and they had a talent for seeing through lies, no matter how impressive those lies might be. As the ceremony reached its climax, High Deity Corthul raised all of his arms toward the sky. Now, mortals, the time has come for you to make your choice. Will you serve willingly, or must we demonstrate why resistance is futile? Captain Morrison stepped forward. He looked up at the towering being who claimed to be a god. He thought about his crew, about humanity, about everything they had built, and everything they hoped to become. We appreciate your offer, Jake said carefully. But humans have a saying, we don't worship anyone who demands worship. Real gods don't need to threaten people to get their respect. The Crystal City went completely silent. The Zephyrians looked at each other in confusion. No species had ever refused them before. Corthul's perfect face twisted with anger. Then you have chosen poorly, mortals. Perhaps a demonstration of divine wrath will change your minds. The silence in the Crystal City was like the moment before a storm. High Deity Corthul's glowing eyes fixed on Captain Morrison with a look of pure rage. The other Zephyrians moved closer, their many arms flowing like angry snakes. You dare refuse gods? Corthul's voice boomed across the floating city. Your arrogance will be your doom, mortal. Jake Morrison stood his ground, even though his heart was beating fast. Behind him, his crew and the diplomatic team stayed calm. They had faced dangerous situations before. They would face this one together. We're not trying to be rude, Jake said. But humans have met many beings who claim to be gods. None of them actually were. Corthul raised all 6 of his arms, and the crystal beneath the human's feet began to crack. Then perhaps you need to understand what you are dealing with. Let us show you the truth of our power. The air around them shimmered, and suddenly the humans were no longer standing in the beautiful Crystal City. They were floating in space, but they could still breathe. Below them stretched a massive planet covered in strange structures that hurt to look at directly. This is our true home, Corthul said. Here we learn to become gods. Images filled the air around them. They saw the Zephyrians as they had been 50,000 years ago. Back then, they looked more normal, like tall aliens with only 2 arms each. They lived on a planet covered in cities and forests, much like Earth. We were scientists, Corthul explained. the greatest scientists in the galaxy. We discovered the secrets of quantum fields and dark energy. We learned to manipulate the very fabric of reality itself. The images showed Zephyrian scientists working with strange machines that bent space and time. They learned to control matter with their thoughts. They found ways to live forever. They became more powerful than any species had ever been. But power changes people, said a new voice. The humans turned to see a younger Zephyrian approaching. This one was smaller than the others, with only 4 arms instead of 6. Her voice was softer, sadder. "I am Veltara," she said. "I was not yet born when my people gained these abilities, but I have lived with the consequences my entire life." "Silence," Cortho commanded. "You will not speak of such things to these mortals." But Veltara continued anyway. "Once we gained godlike power, we lost our way. We became addicted to the worship of other species. We forgot what it meant to be humble, to learn, to grow. We became something terrible." The images changed again. Now they showed the Zephyrians visiting other worlds, demanding worship from primitive species. The aliens who refused were destroyed. Their planets were turned to dust. Entire civilizations vanished because they would not bow down. "We have conquered thousands of worlds," Corthul said, his voice filled with pride. "Every species that has ever met us has learned to worship us. You will be no different." Dr. Hayes was studying his instruments throughout the entire display. "Captain," he whispered to Jake, "I'm detecting massive energy readings from the planet. Below, there's something down there that's powering all of this." Amy Foster had been listening carefully to everything the Zephyrians said. Something was bothering her about their story. "Veltara," she called out, "you said your people became addicted to worship. What did you mean?" Veltara looked at Corthul, who was glaring at her with fury. She seemed to make a decision. "The power we gain came with a price," she said. "We need the worship of other species to maintain our abilities. Without it, we begin to weaken and die. That is enough!" Corthul roared. He gestured with one hand, and Veltara was suddenly frozen in place, unable to speak or move. But the damage was done. The humans now knew that the Zephyrians were not truly gods. They were aliens who had gained incredible power but lost their souls in the process. "You see?" Corthul said, turning back to the humans. "Even our own kind sometimes forget their place. But it matters not. You will worship us, or you will die. There is no third option." The scene around them changed again. Now they were back in the Crystal City, but it looked different. The humans could see through the beautiful illusions to the machinery beneath. Massive computers and energy generators hummed quietly behind walls of light. "We know about your technology," Dr. Hayes said boldly. "You're not gods. You're just very advanced aliens who use machines to create illusions." Corthul laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "Does it matter? Whether we are gods by birth or by choice, we have the power to destroy. That is all that matters." Suddenly, alarms began to sound throughout the city. A Zephyrian servant rushed up to Corthul and whispered something in his ear. The high deity's face grew dark with anger. "It seems we have a problem," Corthul said. "One of your colonies has been sending out signals, trying to contact other species for help. They think they can find allies to fight against us." Jake Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. "What are you going to do?" "We are going to make an example," Corthul replied. "The colony you call New Boston will be destroyed, slowly, painfully, in full view of all your other worlds. This will show your species what happens to those who defy gods. You can't do that." Amy Foster shouted. "Those are innocent people." "Innocent?" Corthul seemed genuinely surprised. "They are rebels against divine authority. They deserve whatever fate awaits them." The Crystal City began to move, accelerating toward the edge of the star system. The humans could see a massive fleet of Zephyrian ships materializing around them. The ships looked like living creatures made of metal and light, constantly changing shape as they moved. You will watch, Corthul commanded. You will see what happens to those who resist us. And then you will return to your people and tell them that submission is their only hope for survival. Jake Morrison looked at his crew and the diplomatic team. They were all thinking the same thing. Somehow, they had to warn New Boston. Somehow, they had to stop this madness. Dr. Hayes was still studying his instruments. Captain, he whispered, I think I found something. The energy source that powers their abilities is artificial. It's a machine, probably located on their homeworld. If we could disrupt it somehow, ... That's impossible, Captain Miller said quietly. We're prisoners here. Our ships are probably under their control. But Amy Foster was looking at Veltara, who was still frozen in place. The young Zephyrian's eyes were moving, trying to communicate something. Amy watched carefully and realized that Veltara was trying to tell them something important. Not all of them agree with this, Amy whispered to Jake. Some of the Zephyrians want to help us. Jake nodded. He had been thinking the same thing. The Zephyrians were not united in their desire to destroy humanity. Some of them, like Veltara, still remembered what it was like to be decent beings. As the fleet moved toward New Boston, Jake Morrison made a decision. He would not let innocent people die just to prove a point about divine power. He would find a way to fight back, even if it seemed impossible. Admiral Sullivan, he said quietly, speaking into his emergency communicator. If you can hear this, New Boston is in danger. The Zephyrians are coming, and they're not planning to just destroy the colony. They want to make it hurt. The communicator crackled with static, but Jake thought he heard a reply. Understood, Captain. We're already moving. Corthul turned to look at Jake with suspicion. What are you doing, mortal? Just praying, Jake replied. Isn't that what you want us to do? Corthul smiled, but it was not a kind smile. Soon you will pray to us in earnest. After you see what we do to those who resist divine will. The fleet continued toward New Boston, carrying with it the power to destroy an entire world. But Jake Morrison was not giving up. Somewhere in the Federation, Admiral Sullivan was preparing for battle. And somewhere in the Zephyrian fleet, Veltara was planning to help the humans she had come to respect. The false gods were about to learn that humans were not like the other species they had conquered. Humans had a habit of fighting back, even when the odds were impossible. And sometimes, just sometimes, they won. New Boston Colony was a peaceful place. It sat on the edge of human space, surrounded by 3 small moons and a ring of mining stations. 50,000 people lived there, working in the mines and farms that supplied the inner worlds with rare metals and food. Colonel Sam Wright stood in the colony's defense center, watching the screens that showed empty space around their world. He had been a soldier for 20 years, but he had never seen anything like what was coming toward them. Sir, they're here, reported his communications officer. The sensors are going crazy. I count at least 50 ships, but they keep changing. Shape, I can't get accurate readings. Sam looked at the main screen and felt his blood turn cold. The Zephyrian fleet was beautiful and terrible at the same time. The ships looked like giant sea creatures made of light and metal, flowing through space like they were swimming in an ocean. They moved in ways that hurt to watch, bending and twisting in patterns that made no sense. Get me Mayor Phillips, Sam ordered. Mayor Jane Phillips was a tough woman who had helped build New Boston from nothing. She ran into the defense center with her hair still messy from sleep. How bad is it, Sam? Bad, Sam replied. These aren't normal ships. They're not following any laws of physics, I understand. Our weapons might not even work against them. Jane looked at the approaching fleet and set her jaw. Then we fight with what we have. I'm not going to let these things hurt my people without a fight. The first attack came without warning. One of the Zephyrian ships fired a beam of pure energy that turned the colony's outer defense station into dust. But it wasn't a quick destruction. The beam worked slowly, and Sam could hear the screams of the people inside over the radio before the station finally died. They're not trying to destroy us quickly, Sam realized. They want us to suffer. They want other people to watch. More beams fired from the alien ships. They hit the mining stations one by one, each time working slowly to cause as much pain as possible. The Zephyrians were making a show of their power, broadcasting it across human space, so everyone could see what happened to people who defied. Gods, all ships, prepare for combat, Sam ordered into his communicator. New Boston had 12 defense ships, small fighters that were designed to chase away pirates. They were nothing compared to the massive Zephyrian vessels, but Sam was not going to give up without a fight. Commander Alex Stone climbed into his fighter, the newest ship in the New Boston fleet. It was fast and carried experimental weapons that the Federation had been testing. Alex had never fired them in combat before, but today seemed like a good time to try. "This is Stone to all fighters," he said over the radio. "I know these things look scary, but they're just machines. Machines can be broken. Let's show them what humans can do." The 12 fighters launched from New Boston's surface, racing toward the massive alien fleet. They looked like tiny insects attacking giant whales, but they moved with purpose, and skilled out Alex fired his experimental weapons at the nearest Zephyrian ship. The beams hit the alien vessel's hull, and something unexpected happened. The ship's smooth surface cracked and sparked. Part of its beautiful glow flickered and went dark. "Did you see that?" Alex shouted over the radio. "These things can be hurt. Aim for the glowing parts." The other fighters joined the attack, firing everything they had at the Zephyrian ships. To everyone's surprise, the aliens began to pull back. Their ships were damaged, leaking energy and struggling to maintain their perfect shapes. But the victory was short-lived. More Zephyrian ships appeared, hundreds of them materializing out of empty space. They surrounded the human fighters and began to fire back. Alex watched in horror as 3 of his fellow pilots were hit by alien weapons. Their ships didn't explode. Instead, they began to change, turning into twisted metal sculptures while the pilots inside screamed. The Zephyrians were not just killing people. They were torturing them. "All fighters, fall back to the colony," Alex ordered. "We can't win this fight alone." Just as the situation looked hopeless, new contacts appeared. On the sensors, Admiral Kate Sullivan's fleet had arrived, led by the USS Dakota with Captain Morrison at the helm. "This is Admiral Sullivan to New Boston Colony," came the voice over the radio. "We're here to help. All civilian ships, stay clear of the combat zone." Jake Morrison looked at the Zephyrian fleet through the Dakota's main screen. There were more ships than his intelligence reports had suggested, and they were even stranger than he had expected. But his crew was ready for a fight. "Ben, target their weapon systems," Jake ordered his tactical officer. "Lisa, scan for any weak points in their energy fields." Commander Ben Tucker smiled grimly as he aimed the Dakota's guns. "With pleasure, Captain. These things hurt a lot of good people." Time to return the favor. The Federation fleet opened fire with everything they had. Plasma beams, quantum torpedoes, and particle cannons lit up space as human ships attacked the aliens who claimed to be gods. At first, it seemed like the human weapons were having no effect. The Zephyrian ships absorbed the energy and kept moving forward. But then Dr. Hayes made a discovery that changed everything. "Captain," Lisa Park called out from her science station, "I'm detecting electromagnetic frequencies that disrupt their energy fields. If we can modify our weapons to emit those frequencies, we might be able to hurt them badly." "Do it," Jake ordered. "Send the frequency data to all ships in the fleet." Within minutes, every human ship had modified their weapons. When they fired again, the results were dramatic. The Zephyrian ships began to flicker and lose their perfect shapes. Some of them actually began to fall apart, revealing the machinery. Hidden inside their energy fields, High Deity Corthil appeared on the Dakota's main screen, his perfect face twisted with rage. "Impossible? You are mortals. You cannot harm gods." "We're not just mortals," Jake replied. "We're humans. And humans have a talent for breaking things that seem unbreakable. The battle raged across space for hours. Human ships were destroyed. But for every Federation vessel that fell, 2 Zephyrian ships were damaged or destroyed. The aliens began to realize that they were not fighting the primitive species they had expected. Commander Stone, still alive in his experimental fighter, made a discovery of his own. Admiral, I'm reading massive energy buildup in the largest Zephyrian ship. I think it's their command vessel. All ships, concentrate fire on that target, Admiral Sullivan ordered. The combined firepower of the entire Federation fleet focused on Cortho's flagship. The massive ship tried to defend itself, but the modified human weapons cut through its energy fields like knives through paper dot as the flagship began to break apart. Something unexpected happened. Other Zephyrian ships stopped fighting and began to retreat. For the first time in 50,000 years, the beings who called themselves gods had been forced to run from a battle. They're falling back, Ben Tucker reported with amazement. All Zephyrian ships are retreating to the edge of the system. Jake Morrison looked at the tactical display and felt a mixture of relief and worry. They had won this battle, but he knew the war was far from over. The Zephyrians would be back, and next time they would be better prepared. Damage report, Jake asked. We lost 6 ships, Lisa reported. 37 more are damaged. But, sir, we proved something important today. These Zephyrians are not gods. They can be hurt. They can be beaten. On the surface of New Boston, Colonel Wright and Mayor Phillips watched the alien fleet disappear into space. The colony was damaged, and many good people had died, but they were still alive. The gods had been defeated by mortals. Send a message to all human colonies, Jane ordered. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that the Zephyrians are not gods. They're just bullies with big guns. And bullies can be stopped if good people stand together. Across human space, the message spread quickly. The beings who had demanded worship had been forced to retreat by human courage and determination. For the first time since the crisis began, people began to hope that, but in the depths of space, High Deity Cortho was planning his revenge. The mortals had embarrassed him in front of his own people. They had shown weakness in beings who claimed to be perfect. That could not be allowed to stand. The humans would pay for their defiance, even if it meant destroying every world they had ever touched. Real war was just beginning. The war room on Earth was filled with tension. Admiral Rick Barnes stood at the center of a massive holographic display showing every human colony and military base in known space. Red dots marked the locations where Zephyrian ships had been spotted. There were too many red dots. They're not coming back for another direct attack, Admiral Barnes said to the gathered officers. They're being smarter this time. Hit-and-run attacks on our supply lines, destroying trade ships, making us afraid to leave our home systems. Captain Nina Ross studied the tactical display with sharp eyes. She commanded the USS Montana, the newest stealth ship in the Federation fleet. Her ship was designed to be invisible, using technology that bent light and energy around it like water flowing around a rock. Admiral, what if we take the fight to them? Nina suggested. Instead of waiting for them to attack us, we go after their home base. That would be suicide, said another officer. We barely survived one battle with them. Going to their homeworld will be walking into a trap. Dr. Luke Chun raised his hand from the back of the room. He was a thin man with thick glasses who looked more like a teacher than a weapons designer. But his brain had created some of the most dangerous weapons humanity had ever built. Actually, it might be our only chance, Dr. Chun said quietly. I've been studying the data from the New Boston battle. The Zephyrians get their power from a central source. If we could destroy that source, they would lose their godlike abilities. Admiral Barnes turned to look at the scientists. Explain. Dr. Chun walked to the holographic display and began pointing at energy readings from the battle. Every time we disrupted their energy fields, the power came from the same direction, their homeworld. There's something there that's feeding energy to all their ships and technology. A power source, Admiral Barnes said, understanding immediately. If we destroy it, we cripple their entire empire. Exactly, Dr. Chun nodded. I've been working on a quantum disruption weapon that could overload their energy systems. But it would have to be delivered directly to the source. Someone would have to get close enough to their homeworld to use it. Nina Ross stepped forward. The Montana could do it. We're designed for stealth missions behind enemy lines. Admiral Barnes looked around the room at his officers. They all knew what this meant. It was a one-way mission. Even if they succeeded in destroying the Zephyrian power source, the ship probably wouldn't make it back. I need volunteers, Admiral Barnes said quietly. This mission is dangerous beyond anything we've ever attempted. No one will think less of you if you choose not to go. To his surprise, every officer in the room raised their hand. 3 days. Later, the USS Montana slipped out of Earth orbit with a crew of volunteers from across the Federation fleet. Captain Morrison and several crew members from the Dakota had insisted on joining the mission. They had been the first to meet the Zephyrians, and they wanted to be there when humanity struck back. Dr. Chun had installed his quantum disruption weapon in the Montana's cargo bay. It was a massive device that took up half the ship's storage. Space. One shot was all they would get. Remember, Dr. Chun explained to the crew as they traveled towards Zephyrian space, this weapon is designed to cause a chain reaction in their power source. If it works, their entire energy network will collapse. If it doesn't work, we'll probably be vaporized instantly. Amy Foster had also volunteered for the mission. As humanity's expert on alien psychology, she hoped to find other Zephyrians like Veltara who might help them. Not all of them support what their leaders are doing, she reminded everyone. Some of them might be willing to help us end this war. The journey to the Zephyrian homeworld took 2 weeks. The Montana stealth systems worked perfectly, hiding them from the massive fleets of alien ships that patrolled the area. But as they got closer to their target, the readings on their sensors became more and more frightening. Captain, reported the science officer, I'm reading energy levels that are off the charts. Whatever they're using to power their abilities, it's bigger than anything we imagined. Nina Ross looked at the main screen as the Zephyrian homeworld came into view. The planet was surrounded by a network of energy constructs that stretched for millions of miles in every direction. Ships moved between them like fish swimming through coral reefs made of pure light. There, Jake Morrison pointed at the planets. Surface, that massive structure in the center of the main continent, that has to be their power source. The structure was enormous, easily the size of a large city. It pulsed with energy that made space itself ripple around it. Streams of power flowed from it to every part of the Zephyrian Empire, feeding their godlike abilities. We need to get closer, Dr. Chun said. The quantum disruptor has to be within 1,000 miles of the target to work properly. As the Montana crept closer to the planet, they began to see the true scope of the Zephyrian Empire. Thousands of alien ships filled the space around the homeworld. Not all of them were Zephyrian vessels. Many belonged to species that had been enslaved by the false gods. Look at those ships, Amy Foster said sadly. Those are Andrelian vessels. And those are Kefmar cruisers. The Zephyrians have turned entire civilizations into servants. On the planet's surface, they could see massive structures that looked like temples and palaces. Millions of alien beings moved between them, all working to serve their supposed gods. The sight made Jake Morrison angry. How many species had the Zephyrians destroyed or enslaved over the centuries? Suddenly, alarms began to sound on the Montanas. Bridge. Captain, we're being scanned, reported the tactical officer. Something has detected us. On the main screen, a familiar figure appeared. It was Veltara, the young Zephyrian who had tried to help them before. She looked scared and was speaking in a whisper. Humans, you must listen to me, she said urgently. Corthel knows you are here. He has prepared a trap. But there is another way. Veltara, Amy Foster said, stepping forward. Can you help us? I can do more than that, Veltara replied. There are others among my people who want to end this madness. We have been waiting for someone strong enough to challenge Korthu's power. You have proven that you are that someone. The young Zephyrian transmitted coordinates to the Montana. There is a hidden entrance to the power source. My allies and I can get you inside, but you must hurry. Korthu is gathering his forces to attack your homeworld. If you do not stop him, soon your entire species will be destroyed. Nina Ross looked at her crew. They had come here expecting to die in a desperate attack. Now they had a chance to succeed, but it would require trusting aliens who had been their enemies. Can we trust her? Nina asked Amy Foster thought about. The young Zephyrian she had met before. Veltara had risked everything to tell them the truth about her people. She had shown more courage than many humans Amy had known. Yes, Amy said firmly. We can trust her. Following Veltara's coordinates, the Montana approached the hidden entrance. It was concealed behind energy barriers that made it invisible to most sensors. As they got closer, other ships began to appear around them, but these were not enemy vessels. Those are Zephyrian ships, Jake Morrison said with surprise. But they're not attacking us. Those are my allies, Veltara explained. We call ourselves the Reborn. We remember what our people were like before they became obsessed with power and worship. We want to return to being scientists and explorers, not tyrants and false gods. The Reborn ships escorted the Montana through the energy barriers and into a tunnel that led deep underground. As they descended, the human crew could see the true structure of the Zephyrian power source dot. It was not just a machine. It was a prison. By all the stars, Dr. Chun whispered as he looked at his readings. There are billions of consciousness, patterns stored in that structure. The Zephyrians haven't just been enslaving species. They've been absorbing their life energy to power their abilities. Amy Foster felt sick as she realized the truth. That's why they need worship from other species. They're feeding off the mental energy of their victims. And that's why your quantum disruptor will work, Veltara said. When you destroy the power source, you will free all the consciousness patterns that have been trapped inside, including the original spirits of my people from before they became monsters. The Montana reached the bottom of the tunnel and emerged into a vast chamber at the heart of the Zephyrian homeworld. The power source rose above them like a mountain made of crystallized energy. It pulsed with the life force of countless civilizations. This is it, Dr. Chun said, preparing his weapon. One shot, and this nightmare ends. But as he reached for the firing controls, new alarms sounded throughout the chamber. High Deity Korthu have found them. So, came the familiar voice over the ship's communication system, the mortals have come to challenge gods in their own temple. How perfectly ironic. You will make excellent additions to our power source. The final battle was about to begin. The chamber shook as High Deity Korthu's forces surrounded the USS Montana. Massive energy weapons fired down from above, turning the crystalline walls into molten rivers of light. The reborn ships that had escorted the humans began to fight. Back, their weapons clashing against their own people in a civil war that had been brewing for thousands of years. All power to shields. Captain Nina Ross shouted over the noise of battle. Dr. Chun, how long do you need to charge that weapon? Dr. Luke Chin was working frantically at his controls, sweat dripping from his forehead. 2 minutes! The quantum disruptor needs time to build up enough energy to crack their power source. 2 minutes might as well have been 2 hours. The Montana was taking heavy damage from weapons that could bend reality itself. Parts of the ship were aging rapidly where Zephyrian beams touched them. Other sections were being turned into different materials entirely. Jake. Morrison grabbed a plasma rifle and headed for the airlock. I'm going outside to buy us some time. Captain, that's suicide, Amy Foster called after him. Maybe, Jake replied, with a grim smile. But someone has to keep them busy while Dr. Chun works. The airlock opened, and Jake stepped out into the energy-filled chamber. The artificial gravity and atmosphere created by the power source allowed him to breathe and walk normally. But everything around him pulsed with dangerous energy. High deity Korthul materialized in front of him, floating several feet off the ground. The false god looked exactly as he had before, perfect and terrible, with 6 arms flowing like liquid metal. "So the little mortal wants to play hero," Korthul said, his voice echoing off the crystal walls. "Do you really think you can challenge a god with such primitive weapons?" "You're not a god," Jake replied, raising his rifle. "You're just a bully who's been picking on people smaller than you for too long." Korthul laughed and gestured with one hand. Jake's rifle began to change, turning from metal into flower petals that scattered in the wind. "Your weapons cannot harm me, mortal. I am beyond your understanding." "Maybe," Jake said, pulling out a knife. "But I don't have to understand you to fight you." He charged at the floating Zephyrian, knowing it was hopeless, but determined to buy his friends as much time as possible. Korthul raised his hand to destroy the foolish human, but something unexpected happened. The knife in Jake's hand began to glow with the same energy frequencies that had disrupted Zephyrian technology at New Boston. Dr. Chun had modified all their weapons before the mission, including the simple blade that Jake carried as a backup. The knife cut through Korthul's energy field like it was made of paper. The high deity screamed in pain and surprise as the blade sliced across his arm, drawing golden blood that sparkled like stars. "Impossible," Korthul shouted. "I am immortal. I am divine." "You're bleeding," Jake pointed out. "Gods don't bleed." Meanwhile, inside the Montana, Dr. Chun's quantum disruptor was almost ready, but the ship was falling apart around him. Sparks flew from damaged systems, and the artificial gravity was failing in some sections. Amy Foster was helping injured crew members when she noticed something strange happening to the power source above them. Faces were appearing in the crystalline structure, millions of them, all looking down at the humans with hope in their eyes. "Dr. Chun," she called out, "I think the consciousnesses trapped in that thing are trying to help us." "They know what we're trying to do." Dr. Chun looked up from his controls and saw what Amy was talking about. The faces in the crystal were moving, pointing toward weak spots in the structure where his weapon would be most effective. "They're showing us where to aim," he realized. After all these years of being prisoners, they want to be free. The weapon finished charging just as Jake Morrison was thrown across the chamber by one of Korthul's energy blasts. The human captain hit the wall hard, but managed to stay conscious. His modified knife had done its job, proving that the so-called god could be hurt. "Fire," Nina Ross ordered. Dr. Chun pulled the trigger on his quantum disruptor. A beam of pure energy shot upward, striking the exact spot that the trapped consciousnesses had indicated. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the power source began to crack. The crack spread quickly, racing through the crystal structure like lightning. Golden light poured out of each crack, and with it came the voices of billions of beings who had been trapped for thousands of years. "We are free," they cried in languages from across the galaxy. "We are finally free." Korthul stopped his attack on Jake Morrison and stared up at his crumbling power source in horror. "No, this cannot be happening. I am a god. I am eternal." But as the power source shattered, Korthul began to change. His perfect appearance melted away like a mask being removed. Underneath, he was revealed as an ancient withered creature, kept alive only by the stolen energy of others. The other Zephyrians throughout the chamber were changing too. Some, like Korthul, became old and weak as their stolen power drained away, but others, the ones who had joined the Reborn, began to look younger and more alive as their true selves were restored. Veltara landed next to Jake Morrison, and he could see that she looked different now. Less perfect, but more real, more alive. "Thank you," she said simply. "You have given us back our souls." The collapsing power source was creating a massive explosion that threatened to destroy the entire star system. The released energy had nowhere to go, and it was building up to dangerous levels. "Everyone needs to evacuate," Dr. Chun shouted. "This whole place is going to blow." But Veltara and the other reborn Zephyrians had a different plan. They joined hands around the collapsing power source, using their remaining abilities to contain the explosion. "We will redirect the energy," Veltara explained to the humans. "We will use it to break the control systems that keep the enslaved species under our command. This is our chance to free everyone." "That will kill you," Amy Foster realized. No," Veltara replied sadly. "But it is the right thing to do. We have spent too many years doing wrong things. This is our chance to make up for some of them." The reborn Zephyrians began to glow as they absorbed the dangerous energy and channeled it outward through the planet's communication networks. Across the galaxy, the control devices that kept entire species enslaved suddenly stopped working. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had been forced to worship the Zephyrians suddenly remembered who they really were. They looked up at the statues and temples they had been forced to build and began to tear them down. The explosion that should have destroyed everything instead became a wave of liberation that spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. The light finally faded. The chamber was quiet. The power source was gone, reduced to harmless crystal dust. The reborn Zephyrians who had sacrificed themselves were gone too, but their sacrifice had freed billions of beings. Korthul lay on the ground, no longer the mighty god he had pretended to be. He was just an old alien who had lived too long and done too much harm. Jake Morrison stood over him, still holding his modified knife. "Please," Korthul whispered. "I was a god. I ruled the galaxy. Don't let me die as a mortal." Jake looked down at the pathetic creature who had once demanded worship from humanity. He thought about all the people who had died, all the species that had been enslaved, all the suffering that had been caused by one being's desire to be worshipped. "You were never a god," Jake said quietly. "You were just someone who forgot how to be decent. But even after everything you've done, you still have a choice. You can spend whatever time you have left trying to fix some of the damage you've caused." From the surface of the planet, other surviving Zephyrians approached the chamber. These were the ones who had not been part of either the ruling class or the reborn. They looked confused and lost, like people waking up from a long, bad dream. "What happens now?" One of them asked. Amy Foster stepped forward. "Now you learn to live without being gods, or having gods rule over you. It's not easy, but it's worth it." 6 months later, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of a new ship, looking out at a galaxy that was very different from the one he had known. The Zephyrian Empire was gone, replaced by dozens of free worlds learning to govern themselves. Some species chose to work together, others preferred to be alone. A few even chose to help the surviving Zephyrians learn how to live normal lives. There were still problems and conflicts, but they were the normal problems of free people, not the suffering imposed by false gods. President Maria Santos appeared on the communication screen, calling from Earth. "Captain Morrison, I have a new mission for you. There are reports of another species claiming to have divine authority over the Deneb sector. They're demanding tribute from the local colonies." Jake smiled. "Understood, Madam President. I think we know how to handle that situation. Now." As his ship turned toward Deneb, Jake Morrison thought about what humanity had learned. They had proven that no being, no matter how powerful, had the right to claim authority over others just because they were strong. They had shown that even the mightiest tyrants could be defeated by people who refused to kneel. Most importantly, they had learned that true strength came not from the power to destroy, but from the courage to stand up for what was right, even when the odds seemed impossible. The age of false gods was over. The age of free people had begun, and humanity would make sure it stayed that way.